We're also going to get his take on new Homeland Security laser scanner reads people at molecular level. And again, this is just more quackery. It's like they've proven the lie detectors are just there to engage in fraud and was quackery. Well, now they just have high-tech lasers that claim this and that. And it's all part of all of our tax money that's been used to militarize the rest of the world coming back home here to the United States. But first off, I wanted to get Colonel Roberts on because every time I see a story in the news, like one of the people that responded, one of the, what was it, FBI agents that responded to the Shanksville, Pennsylvania crash. In fact, guys, will you reprint me that article? Said that she didn't see any bodies. Yeah, because it wasn't the jet aircraft. And just saw a hole in the ground, but that she saw angels. Very interesting. She has a book out on that. And Colonel Roberts died for about 10 minutes on the operating table years ago and had quite an experience. So maybe at the end, I know he's told it, but he only comes on a few times a year. I think it was a couple years ago last time he told it. Perhaps he'll recap that story for us here on the broadcast today. And then we have popping in about 15 minutes in the next hour, Hayden Perry, CEO of Oxytec. That's the GMO mosquitoes they're getting ready to release in the U.S. He's agreed to come on, so that should be interesting from the UK. But first off, Colonel Roberts was asking my producer last week when we were setting him up for the show if I knew what Blackstar, Operation Blackstar was. And then the answer is no, but I want to get his take on that. There's also Operation 01. I have talked to some sources about that, and that's a program for mass arrest, relocation. But we don't need to speculate anymore. It's now in NLE 09, 10, and 11, the FEMA plans to use foreign troops here. It's now admitted the public plan to use Canadian and Mexican troops in the John Warren Defense Authorization Act. We've seen Washington Post headlines the last few years where, you know, generals asked by Congress to explain program of foreign troops. We've seen Russian troops trained here. It's all part of an acclamation. And the first person I saw give credible evidence of this more than a decade ago was Colonel Roberts. We saw cooperative nugget and drills with foreign troops, but they could say, oh, that's for overseas. No, this is for here in the U.S. And now it's so overt, and now Army documents have been confirmed to be real. The Army responded to one we released 2 months ago, saying, yes, there are re-education camps for political dissidents. There's a new Army document out that's public. It's unclassified for gun confiscation. They call it gun evacuation, work brigades. So the fact that this is getting a lot more funding now, I mean, by orders of magnitude, and is going so public, that concerns me that they're warming it up, getting ready to go operational. Armored vehicles being delivered everywhere, drones being delivered, threat fusion centers openly saying, yeah, we are spying on citizens. They say the new threat isn't al-Qaeda. This was going on a long time ago behind the scenes, but now they're fully shifting, saying, well, they have the new garbage man training where all the drills are, it's conservatives they're after, and the victims are Muslims. So it's like, this new idea that the conservatives are terrorists hiding, under every bed out there. So I wanted to get Colonel Roberts' take on all of this. His website is riflewarrior.com. I won't go over his whole bio, but I've known him for a long time. He's a good friend. We've spoken at conferences and things together. He's also been a syndicated talk show host. And he, of course, is a best-selling, what is it, #1 New York Times bestseller. He's written One Shot, One Kill, a whole bunch of best-selling books. He was also a helicopter unit pilot, chief of maintenance as well there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was SWAT team leader. Before that, he was a Marine in Vietnam, decorated. And then after that, he went into Army intelligence, became a colonel, lieutenant colonel. And he joins us now a little bit into the next hour. And then our next guest is coming on to break down his view, his take. He hadn't been on probably 6 to 8 months. Colonel Roberts, always good to have you on, Craig. Right now, you heard me give that preface. From all the police and military sources you have, what is going on right now? Should we be concerned?
Oh, I'd absolutely be concerned right now. I'm seeing more people waking up and just they're getting scared and they're getting angry. They know something's up. They know something's not right. They know they got a renegade government. They got a rogue, out of control mess of federal agencies out there. you know, they read reports. Of course, the internet helps a lot on getting a lot of information out, even though some of it may be disinformation. You have to know how to weed through that and filter it. You know, we had to do that, you know, in the Intel shop. We always had to weed through and filter everything to figure out what was true and what wasn't. And we're seeing stuff, you know, just bits and pieces. But you and I have talked about this before. The way you work on intelligence is you take all these bits and pieces and you put them on the wall and you try to form a picture. Are they connected together? Do they mean anything? And what goes with what bit of information? And when we do that with all the stuff going on now, ever since 9/11, it's been building all the time toward a something coming to a head in this country. And now with this guy in the White House that won't even give his records, his school records, his true birth certificate. You know, I mean, we've gone through all of this stuff before. He won't do any of that. And you've got all these things about the Department of Homeland Security buying all this 40 caliber ammunition, hollow point. That is not used by the military. The military doesn't even use 40 calibers. And so why do they need, you know, hundreds of thousands or millions of rounds of ammunition? Then we find out that now they're buying 223, which fits the M16 series, the AR-15 series. And they're, you know, what was it, 1.2, 1.4 million rounds of that? That's not for target practice. And we're seeing all of this information coming out about bringing certain troops back home into the country and training them for anti-terrorist training on domestic soil. Well, who, you know, if you're going to have a brigade of troops, who are they going to go up against? You know, we're not talking about a group of 12 Hamas terrorists down the street. We're talking about a lot of people. You've got all these things happening at once. Plus, there's reports of Chinese equipment being stockpiled in Mexico and in Freeport in the Bahamas, which just happens to be the largest transshipment port in the world, is run by Hutchison Whampoa and Costco.
Oh, they admit that the Chinese have taken over that island. They're building all those ports and stockpiling weapons, and now they can't even release the new Red Dawn. They had to re-edit it to where the Chinese government wasn't criticized. I mean, that's how pathetic our country's gotten.
Oh, I know, and we've got all these different types of situations going on with computer viruses now that China could attack our systems. Look what we did to the Iranian systems with that virus that we sent over to their nuclear power plant computers. They could do the same thing here with our computers. In fact, Monday, I think it was, 83,000 computers were supposed to shut down because of a worm that was in them that they'd gotten off the internet that was redirecting the searches to other websites. It just goes on and on and on. You know, I teach a lot of military, police, and civilian firearms courses, and one of them is the concealed carry class for our state. And I have had more people come into these classes that we're talking old people, we're talking just a lot of ladies are coming in now. They're scared. They want to know how to use a gun. They've never had a gun before in their life, and they're 70 years old or maybe 75 years old, and they want a gun in their house, and they don't want, you know, a double-barrel shotgun. They want a pistol with that you know, has 13 rounds in the magazine and three spare magazines and a stockpile of ammo. And I say, you know, this gal isn't buying this stuff to you know, guard her cookies. They're actually out all over the place, afraid of what's going on in this country.
Exactly. Well, they've had questionnaires. This has even been in USA Today. With 1 million guns was the previous record in 1 month. Then it was 2 million, 3 million. They had 1 month this year where 5 million guns through the NICS got sold. That's 5 times the previous record. And when they questionnaire ask them, they say collapse and we don't trust the government. So you know, the so-called government, have you seen the clips, Colonel, where they now all over the news are announcing that America has been captured by foreign banks and that we're slaves and that it's a good thing?
No, I haven't seen that.
I'm not kidding. I can play a clip right now for you. What do you make of them saying that?
Well, I don't doubt it a bit. I mean, our Federal Reserve System has been joined at the hip with the Bank of England and the Rothschilds since the very beginning of 1923. So, you know, I had a meeting with a wills and trust lawyer a couple of weeks ago, and we got to talking about this, and I said, when we were in my stockbroker's office, and I said, would you get on the computer and buy me 100 shares of Federal Reserve Incorporated stock? He said, what? I said, would you do that? And he says, no, you can't buy stock in that. Then I said, how come you can have a corporation and you can only have 11 stockholders? And so he's been doing his research. He'll get back to me.
And that's how you plant seeds. Stay there. I want to get into analyzing this globalist takeover, what they're planning to do with this collapsing the cities, the counties, what you see coming. Everybody in their gut can feel it, so they're digging in. Government's digging in. What's coming?
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
Yeah, they're in, of all places, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I saw 2 years ago where one of the city council people said, we got to inspect gardens. People might be growing marijuana in them. And then it was Tulsa again, where they went and cut a woman's garden down in her backyard, an old woman, and charged her for it. Hey, what's going on in Tulsa there, Colonel Craig Roberts? You were a police officer there for a long time.
Well, I think code enforcement's gotten out of control. Of course, there's always two sides to every story. In one of those cases, these people that let their lawn grow so high that it was a fire hazard, and it scared everybody around them. And, if it had been me, I'd have gone over there and mowed it for her. I mean, it wouldn't have bothered me a bit. So, when you live in cities, the closer you live together, the less you know each other. You move out in the country, you meet all your neighbors in no time because they come by. But in the city, people, they want to withdraw inside their house, not that sort of thing. And so they don't, unless you know your neighbors, you don't trust them, they don't trust you, and pretty soon you've got them complaining if you leave your trash cans out, if your dog gets out, if your cat goes over to their yard.
Exactly. We're losing human society watching television all day. So you heard my question as we went to break. Clearly, we're in a designed implosion, so the feds can come in as the savior. I have a clip we're going to play in the next segment of the bankers announcing that we are their slaves. They're saying it in all these different publications. The TSA is groping people everywhere. They're running highway checkpoints. Are we being eased into martial law? And how do the globalists plan on being able to have this takeover take place?
There's about 3 or 4 different ways to look at this, and I've kind of war-gamed it around. This country right now is on the verge of basically a revolution. It could just about anything could kick it off. It could be an instigated set of race riots. It could be food shortages. It could be a breakdown in transportation so that nothing gets to the cities from the country. It could be a lockdown on travel due to, some terrorist activity. It could be Islamic terrorism that's set off to go, with Iran. It could be any type of societal breakdown, especially in the larger cities, to where they have to do something about it. They declare martial law, whatever. And, we talked about General McCaffrey's statement to the CASQ course at Fort Leavenworth years ago when he said that with the build-down of our armed forces, this is back during the Clinton administration when they were closing bases under the BRAC plan and all that, and they're reducing the number of planes in our fighter squadrons, reducing the number of ships, reducing the number of divisions, and so on and so forth. He said with the build-down of our armed forces being what it is, if we get committed in 2 or more fronts overseas, we will be forced to call upon foreign assets to police our streets, which he means UN troops. And we've been training, you mentioned this earlier, we have trained foreign troops in the past with a cooperative nugget down at Fort Polk, Louisiana, on a combat town that looks like downtown America. It doesn't look like, some third world country. It has a church, it has a school, it has buildings.
But they now admit they plan to use foreign troops here. I mean, that's in mainstream news now.
Yeah. And now we've got all these Russians training up at Fort Carson, Colorado. Of course, we get different numbers, anything from 12 to 1,200 or whatever. And it's interesting that Fort Carson at Colorado Springs isn't that far from Denver, and Denver is where you have Denver International Airport. I call it Devil International. And it's out in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing wrong with Stapleton. But they came in and they built that place, and they built an underground city under it that you can't get into. You can't take a tour of it. And they've got an extra runway out there that's buried under sand that you can clear with a this is according to the Denver Police Department, by the way, that told me this. They were out there when they were building this thing. If they need another runway, they just run a snowblower over it. They've got one that's a mile long or however long it is, big long one. They can land anything up there because you got to have up at that altitude. You got to have a longer runway because the air's thinner.
Sure. By the way, have you been to Denver lately? I was there a couple years ago, and they had weird pyramids and Anubis and obelisk. I mean, giant ones out on the side of the runway now, and it's gotten even weirder out there.
Well, anybody can go on the internet and look up Denver International murals. and see those murals up there showing what looks to be a Russian stormtrooper with an AK-47 wearing a big greatcoat.
And a bunch of dead kids.
A bunch of dead kids and coffins, and the thing about Columbine is on there before it happened. And so, you know, why?
No, but I'm saying, so last time I was there, I don't know if it's still there, you're flying in, there's giant gold obelisk and, you know, 200-foot tall Egyptian gods and stuff out on the side of the runway. It's weird.
I didn't see that when I was there because I was at the terminal, but just the stuff in the terminal. And if you start taking pictures of that stuff now, the security guards come and get you. I mean, it's incredible.
We're going to go to break. A long segment coming up. I want to get into a host of issues with you, but I want to talk about ways to, you know, try to turn this around. But I agree with you. The globalists know it's their takeover. They're geared up for a counter-revolution. But it just, I mean, I've war-gamed it from every angle. It just runs from bad to worse unless you're a globalist sitting overseas watching it all happen. Now, there are hundreds of great products at InfoWarsTeam.com, but I want to point out the 3 that have helped me lose 37 pounds in just 2 months. Products like Beyond Tangy Tangerine, Pollen Burst, and Rebound. When I started taking the Tangy Tangerine and other products every day, I lost more than 37 pounds in just 2 months. Now that's results. I want to challenge my listeners to go to InfoWarsTeam.com and to order just 3 of their products, and you will see the changes in the way you look, feel, and in your appetite almost immediately. Start your journey to health and wellness today. InfoWarsTeam.com. Call you Dr. Roberts because you are kind of a doctor of life. But speaking of Dr. Roberts, even Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, that's what I was about to say, is coming out, and you know, he was the former head of the Treasury for policy, you know, a high-level guy, all the big national think tanks, and he's had to come around to our thinking that, yes, it's a global, private, corporate, fascist government. They're totally evil. They're going to start World War III, and they do plan the mass arrest, re-education, all of it. I want to play this clip and then get your take on it. Here is the clip, one of the clips. There are literally hundreds of news articles, and I've shown them to you. Time Magazine, Newsweek, Financial Times of London, The Economist, all saying, oh, technocrats, unelected, run Europe, and they're going to run us, and they're going to turn the economy off, but it's really cool to be poor. And you go to Whole Foods, half the magazines are austerity, how much fun it is, austerity today, being poor is cool, having nothing's cool. But again, you're going to pay a lot more for less. It's a total organized post-industrial system. The Russians could have supplied sausages and stuff. They wanted you to stand in line, folks. It's about total control. And then now they come out and just say, yes, we've been conquered by foreign banks. We're their slaves. Here is a clip. And by the way, it's 4 minutes long. All the guests agree and say it's good to be their slaves except one. So we were crazy to say this. Colonel Roberts was crazy to write books 15 years ago about it and have a radio show. And they even had the FBI investigate him. Now it's just a fact, but we're still bad, though. Remember that. We're still bad people. We're still extremists, the ADL and Southern Poverty Law Center. You know, I see the latest police training manuals, and they send them out, and this crazy person thinks foreign banks are taking over and there's going to be a world government and there's going to be a carbon tax. And then you open the newspaper up and it's all happening. And I found the weird ADL Southern Poverty Law Center stuff. I shouldn't say this because they might adjust it. I guess they're so lazy, you know, government paycheck types, because they get government funding to do it. You know, they're private, that they won't even stop them. I mean, they're just lazy. They don't care. They turn out like 1 article a year or something. That it's actually waking police and military up because they're going, wait a minute. George Washington's bad, literally, and then they open the newspaper up and all this is happening. I mean, I know I'm ranting here, Craig, but what is it like to see all this coming, being laughed at by people on the force, then investigated when you were talking about Oklahoma City and were sent to investigate it, and then now, I mean, I know a lot of police and military, you told me last time you were on, come to you now and apologize, but, I mean, still, now we've been proven right. But what happens from here? I mean, what is it like to hear things like that? Global governance run by megabanks.
Well, yeah. I mean, we already knew that was happening a long time ago, and it was building up to where it's going to be just one, you know, giant world bank controls everything, and you got the banksters running it. But, you know, about what you're talking about a second ago, that, you know, a man is never a prophet in his own village. But if you go to a different village, all of a sudden, you know, you're a genius. You know, if I traveled around the country and did seminars like the one we did up in Kansas City, people say, wow, this guy really knows his stuff. I've got to check into this. But you consider my own police department or my own military unit or even around the neighborhood, if I talked about any of this, they looked at me and said, yeah, well, Crazy Craig, he's lost it again. He's off the ranch.
Even though you were speaking to crowds of thousands of people, syndicated radio show, they had no respect for their fellow American who was a veteran of Vietnam, the police force, the SWAT team, the helicopter, survived a helicopter crash, everything. So young people try to wake up their folks and they say they get no respect. They shouldn't feel bad. You're a pillar of the community and they wouldn't listen to you.
That's right. You know, there's only two types of birds in the human race, eagles and ostriches. And hopefully the eagles are listening to your show because the ostriches won't do it and they don't want to hear any of this stuff. I've got a brother-in-law, you know, who's a PhD, a genius, and but he's very liberal, and you try to talk to him about any of this stuff, it's like talking to the wall. It's a doe in the headlights look on his face, like that can't be happening. I don't believe any of it, and you can't educate him. So there are those ostriches out there that can't be educated. We both have had people come to us saying, hey, I want to tell my neighbors, I want to tell my family, but nobody wants to hear this stuff. Nobody wants to believe it. How do I do that? How do I get this information to them? Well, you can't. What you can do is you can drop a seed and hope it grows. You can give them a suggestion, maybe give them a book and say, you ought to at least look through this book of whatever, you know, the material is that goes in this direction. Like Killzone, my book Killzone, I've given that to people, and they've read that, and then they've come back and they said, what does the Council on Foreign Relations and the Rothschilds and the Federal Reserve Bank have to do with the Kennedy assassination? And I said, okay, here it is, da-da-da-da-da, and they read that, and they say, okay, where else can I get more information? I'll say, well, okay, the creature from Jekyll Island, you go there, you go, you know, and start naming off different books that they can just get one, read it, it'll lead to another one. And that's one way to get information. Of course, and
it all fits together because when you're talking about a book written in 1971, like None Dare Call a Conspiracy, that we sell at Infowars.com, you read this, you know, 40 years later, it all came true exactly as they said, because they were going off congressional hearings and investigations. I mean, when they ran the Federal Reserve through in 1913, almost the entire population was awake. Congress was pretty much against it. They had to pass it in the middle of the night with a quorum of 3 senators. I mean, you know, people used to know about this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a book that even predates that was written back in the 1920s and 30s called Red Fog Over America by a Canadian named Cunningham. He was an officer in the British Navy as a submarine officer in World War I, immigrated to Canada and got, you know, went to work for the Canadian government. He saw the unions being taken over by the Communist Party. And then he saw the same thing happening in the United States. And he said that the communists will call themselves socialists, and they'll get into the left side of government, the left wing, the liberal side of government, and say they are socialist or that they're for the people and all this stuff. He says, but they're actually hardcore communists being controlled out of Moscow. And this is the 1920s. And he said, this is all things that are going to happen, and most of it's already happened in Canada. And then he gets into the socialized medicine aspect of it. You know, they control your health, they control your records, they control everything. And you're just another number.
People that say that this UN treaty won't get our guns, it's written open-ended. I've got the UN quotes and articles up at Infowars.com today, even where the U.S. ambassador says in New York, right here on our own shores, you've got a Trojan horse. They won't accept U.S. firearms policy. They want to take the decision away from the U.S. electorate and undermine the Constitution. And I've read the thing. I've read over the treaty. It says they register all our guns, and then the UN can direct with the member states to ban any guns they want, and they're using countries that have already signed on to totally ban civilian ownership of firearms. That is the goal. And people that say this won't happen, hey, they'll do it and let that start the Civil War, because the globalists don't care if a bunch of police and military get killed trying to enforce this. But from my research, Colonel Roberts, you've been a police officer and in the military, Marines and Army. Am I correct in saying, I mean, if you've got 200 million gun owners, If 2% of them fought back, that's, 4 million people. I mean, there's no way. If the police and military try to engage in a gun confiscation, they might as well go jump off a cliff. And so they need to stand down on that order because it's unconstitutional.
Well, they're not going to. That's the thing. I've talked to officers, I've talked to state police, and even some feds, and they said if that order came down, we'd quit. We wouldn't do it. And so that's where the foreign troops come in. You've got to have people who don't mind going up against Americans. And, they could have, 10 divisions of Chinese troops in Mexico right now, and we wouldn't know about it if our media doesn't cover it. And unless you know that they're there and can prove it and have pictures and all of this stuff, no one's going to believe it anyway until it happens. But China has been landing a lot of material for years into, armored vehicles, all kinds of stuff.
But we know the standard operation for these governments. China admits they have 6,000 front companies in the U.S. They're always talking about Russia, but China's the real issue. And the globalists have given them the Panama Canal, given them the ports in the Bahamas that you mentioned. And what they do is they go get businesses, set things up as sleeper fronts. That's the model, 6,000 fronts. Oh, yeah.
And do you remember back in the 90s when they found that shipping container in San Diego full of AK-47s and hand grenades and RPGs?
Yes.
And they found another one in Long Beach, and then they found one down in Corpus Christi, Texas, I think was where they found one. And they were popping up around the country. Then that whole story died, and the excuse that we got was, that's smugglers bringing stuff in for street gangs. And I'm thinking, yeah, a lot of street gangs run around with anti-tank weapons, and landmines.
And meanwhile, the globalists had the police training to literally fight good old boys, libertarians, conservatives. That's the whole posture is for that now, while meanwhile, this country is just completely wide open.
Yeah, and there's another aspect. I got some information the other day. I can't verify it. I don't know anything more about it, but I'll just mention it because maybe if the word gets out, it won't happen if it's planned to happen. And the October surprise was leaked that the government is going to seize 401ks and IRAs and certain pension plans because of the national debt, and to come up with what's known as a GRA, Government Retirement Option, or I can't remember.
Oh, no, they've been talking about grabbing them and, quote, protecting them, but to protect them, they need to take part of it.
Yeah, well, of course. But once you lose control of your own 401k, you can't get your money out of it. It's the guaranteed pension plan or some stupid thing that they're coming up with.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of really wealthy people and famous folks, and all of their top financial advisors are telling them there's going to be a total collapse. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but look at all these cities going bankrupt everywhere.
Well, yeah, look at California going bankrupt too. I mean, that place is falling like, when you've got more people taking than producing, it implodes, and that's what's happening to California. It's happening in other states as well. I think New York's high on the list. When it becomes a welfare state, like Churchill said, it only works as long as you can get money out of the other guy's pocket. Well, you've got all these people moving out of these states and taking their businesses with them and taking their jobs with them, and the only thing you've got left is illegal aliens and people on welfare and people who don't work, and the state can't support them anymore. These politicians get in there and they come up with these entitlement programs because that's their way of using our money to buy votes for them. Yeah.
What do you make of Obama publicly saying NATO and the UN run our military and telling Congress to sit down and shut up, and Congress did, and shutting down power plants not owned by his buddies, taking dealerships away from people that didn't give him money? I mean, it's just so incredible. Legalizing the illegal aliens outside of law, fast and furious. I mean, imagine what's going on we don't know about.
Right. Right. I mean, it's like I said earlier, it's out of control. You've got a rogue element in the government, and they do whatever they want, and they don't care what the Constitution says. They don't care what the laws say. And if he can go around Congress with an executive order, he'll do it. He just does his own thing, and he doesn't care what the right from the wrong or the rule of law.
Why is he so confident?
Because I think since he works pretty much for George Soros and a few other people up there, that he's not worried about anything, and he doesn't care if he gets reelected or not, because he could maintain power by declaring a national emergency and setting the election aside. You know, we could see something like that go on.
And by the way, I mean, you've got Larry Summers in the Washington Post talking about this in total collapse, but then we get criticized for being pessimist porn dealers when all we're doing is analyzing what's really happening. And by the way, we saw it a million miles away. Why did you see this coming a million miles away? When did you really start waking up?
Well, I started back in the late 1980s when I went to Dealey Plaza for the first time and looked around, and then ended up going up into the Texas School Book Depository to the 6th floor and looking out, and I'm saying, there's no way in the world that Oswald did what they said he did from this position with that piece of junk rifle. It just couldn't happen. I even tried to recreate it myself. I did it for a Japanese film company. It came over here. We took a Carcano, and we took it up on a deck overlooking a valley that was about the same distance. We were shooting at 88 yards at a man-sized target and trying to get all those shots off, and so on and so forth. And I'm a heck of a lot better shot than Oswald ever was. And we couldn't recreate it. And so anyway, I looked around and said, well, if they lied if the government lied about the Kennedy assassination, what else did they lie about? And I started just looking at different directions and different things, and one thing led to another, and I found out about the Federal Reserve System. I found out how they brought that in. All kind of just one thing after another. And so I wrote a book called Legacy of Dishonor, and it had to do with crimes and cover-ups of the U.S. government from World War II all the way up to the present time. And the Kennedy assassination was the first part of that, and then I got into other cases as well. And I sent it to my agent, and and of course by then I'd published several books in New York City through Simon & Schuster and Pocket Books and some of the others, Avon. And he couldn't sell that book. It's the best book I ever wrote, and he couldn't sell that book. He took it to 10 different publishers, and finally one of the publishers at Simon & Schuster called me at home on a Saturday night from his house. And he said, you've got to get this information out to the American people. People have to see this. And I said, well, why don't you take it? And he said, I can't. I'd lose my job. There's too much in there that the powers that be do not want out. And we've got editors in every publishing house in New York City that make sure this kind of information never sees the light of day. So I had to form my own company. I formed Consolidated Press, and I extracted enough out for the book Kill Zone. And then what was left over became the Medusa File. And so those two kind of go together. That's when everything started happening to me. And then, of course, the Oklahoma City bombing happened, and then TW-800 went down, and then we had the Amtrak derailment in Arizona, and it's just one thing after another, and I was getting pulled in all these different directions by different people to help investigate these things. So that's pretty much where all of that started.
By the way, we're going to put on screen right now. You guys can punch up my computer for people watching on prisonplanet.tv, because that sounded crazier earlier. Radio listeners just type in Egyptian statues, DIA, Denver International Airport, and there's Anubis, again, over 100 feet tall. And last time I flew in there, they had a whole bunch of these obelisks and weird. And I said, what's that about? And the security people said, don't ask questions. So it's like, why do you have Nazis killing children on the walls and Egyptian gods everywhere? And they say, like Colonel Roberts said, that don't ask questions. Yeah. So I mean, whatever weirdness they're involved in out there, I just wanted to show people watching on prisonplanet.tv that, so they wouldn't think that we were crazy.
Well, these people are occultic. They're Luciferians. The Council of 13 is all Luciferian, and Lucifer is their god. They don't believe in Satan. They believe in Lucifer, the god of light, or the angel of light.
Well, the head of the UN Planetary Initiative, David Spangler, said, "You will accept a Luciferian pledge, or we will kill you. Once the world government's set up, you will worship Lucifer, or you're dead." Yeah.
Well, they think that's where they get their power. And you mentioned earlier about all the blood in the streets that'll happen if we have a civil war, a revolution, a race war, whatever. We got to remember that these are the same people that want to kill off 80% of the human population. So they don't care.
In fact, they like it.
Yeah, they think that's a great plan. They'd like us just to kill each other off.
Incredible. Colonel Roberts, any other points you'd like to make? Think about that in the time we have here with you today, things that have been, burrs in your saddle that you'd like to relay to a couple million people. The website's riflewarrior.com. Your books are there. It's excellent. But expanding on your story, that you told when, we got about 5-6 minutes in what's left of this segment because I skipped the break. Describe to people the experience you had when you died at the hospital, because people from every other culture, even people that aren't Christian, have that same experience. And if that doesn't get people's attention, I don't know what will. For all these people that are selling out to evil because they're you know, these folks that think that you only live once and that there's no life after death and so what, just have fun, join the dark side, evil's cool. I want to give you the floor here until we go to the break, breaking down what happened to you. And I appreciate you telling the story. I know you're tired of telling it.
Well, it was in August of '97, and I had retired from the police department by then, and I ended up with colon cancer, and it metastasized and got pretty bad. They put me on chemotherapy, and the chemotherapy is really, I think, what basically did most of the damage. You know, a few months into that, I hemorrhaged internally and started bleeding out internally, and my stomach hemorrhaged. And the ambulance took me to the hospital, and got to the emergency room, and they put me in a room there, and this one doctor came in that had worked on me before. I knew him, and he said, have you got a living will? And I said, no, I don't have a living will. I got a regular will. He said, no, you're going to need a living will. He said, because we're probably going to lose you tonight. And he said, I said, no, you're not going to lose me tonight. I'm going to be fine. By then, my vision was fading. Things were really going south, and they were hooking stuff up to me and putting tubes down my throat. And one thing led to another. And he'd already told my wife that there's no way I was going to make it through the night. And they came in, they started putting that tube down my throat, and the next thing I knew, I flatlined. And immediately, I mean instantaneously, I'm sitting in this nice, cool room. It's dark. I can't really see anything. I just know that I'm in this area, you know. I'm sitting down. I'm comfortable. I felt like I was 23 years old in perfect health. I knew my guardian angel was standing right behind me, and he was talking to me, but it was thoughts going into my mind. It was like telepathy. I was getting all this information. I knew I had come through some kind of a portal to my left, and there was one that would open up to my right that I would go through to go to the next stage, whatever that was, and that was evidently where I was going to meet relatives and friends who had gone before me. That was going to be heaven. I also knew that in front of me, like in the floor out there somewhere, a pit would open up. And if a decision was made that that's the direction I was going in, it was absolutely terrifying that was there. That was hell. And I was told of several things, and one of the things was get off of the poison. In other words, stop the chemo and trust in God. God will heal you. And, you know, that I had to change a lot of things, that I had to change my diet, I had to change a lot of things I was doing and do things different, and so on and so forth. And then all of it, I did not care about this life at all. It's like leaving the kitchen and going in the living room. You don't care about the kitchen anymore. It meant nothing to me anymore. Time meant nothing to me anymore. And then, all of a sudden, bang, I wake up. I felt like I was gone about 3 full minutes. It was 18 hours later. And I'm in the ICU, and they've got, you know, IVs on me and stuff, and they paged the doctor, and he came in, you know, and he said, we lost you. You flatlined. He said, we were getting ready to unhook you when we got a heartbeat. You were gone 3 minutes. Of course, I wasn't conscious after.
And I'm going from memory. You also, I mean, from memory, I think it happened a couple times, correct? It was back and forth?
What was?
I'm just going from memory from the story. So you were gone, and they got you back?
Yeah, they didn't get me back. I was sent back. They gave up. I flatlined, and they tried to resuscitate. They tried, I don't know if they did the defibrillator. I don't know. All I know is they were unhooking me and declaring me dead when all of a sudden they got a heartbeat. And that's when I was sent back because my mission here was not finished. The aftermath of this, by the way, is I was sent back to the oncologist to start chemo again, and I walked in, and he said on a Friday, and this is after I went through 30 days of physical therapy and a week and a half in ICU. Finally got home and was able to move again after 30 days of physical therapy, and I got because I couldn't even get off the couch. I was so weak. I was down to 160 pounds, and I went to see the oncologist, and he said, "We'll start you on chemo on Monday. Be here at 9 o'clock." Blah blah. I said, "I'm not going to do it. I'm not taking any more of your poison." And he looked at me, and I swear, Alex, it was like a movie is out of Hollywood. His face got demonic, and he had this horrible, hateful scowl on his face, and he growled, and he said, "If you don't, you'll be dead in 6 months, and no one can stop it." And I just stood up, and I said, I'm gonna be around a long time, Doc. A lot longer than you
I mean, because you abbreviated it. Tell the part about the data you were given and the fact that, you could tell decisions were being made and that you were sent back.
Yeah, the decisions were being made whether or not take me on or send me back, and the decision was made to send me back. But I was told that I would meet people that I could talk to and tell them things that it may not mean anything to me, but it would mean something to them, and that also I would be able to tell when things were going to happen before they happened. Just a bad feeling that something was going to happen in a given part of the country, or even on the highway I was driving down.
And again, you couldn't see the angel, but you knew the presence was there and that it had been there your whole life.
Right. He'd been with me in Vietnam. Everybody has one. Every one of you people out there have a guardian angel, whether you want to believe that or not, and they're there. And you just listen to them, because that's the good side of your conscience talking to you. And you also have a demon that tries to follow you around occasionally, and he's the one that tries to influence you to do the stuff you know you're not supposed to do. God gives us the choice of picking one or the other. He gives us that choice. You can pick anything you want, but later on you're going to answer for it.
And John Bound, out there running the board, he told me this a long time ago, died and had the same experience, just remembers the calm place, the angel, and then they got him back to life, or God sent him back. Incredible. We'll spend 5 more minutes with you, Colonel, on other tidbits. We have another guest coming up. Always amazing. Sick of the globalist eugenicist control freaks adding poison to your water and laughing as you get sick and die? Start purifying your water with ProPur. My friends, I've done a lot of research, and the best gravity filter out there, bar none, is ProPur, and it's available discounted at Infowars.com. Its filters are silver impregnated to prevent bacterial growth. There's no priming required. It's NSF 42 certified. Optional fluoride filters can reduce fluoride up to 95%. Easy to set up and use. Doesn't require electricity. Purify water from lakes, streams, ponds, and wells. This filter system leaves in beneficial minerals, which is key. Save money by not buying bottled water and avoid BPA that leaches from the plastic. ProPur is the best gravity-fed filter out there. It's what my family uses. Infowars.com already has the lowest price on ProPur. But if you add the promo code WATER at checkout, you get an additional 10% off at Infowars.com. You can also call to order 888-253-3139. Colonel Craig Roberts, RifleWarrior.com. I'm Alex Jones of Infowars.com. Craig, we got 5 minutes left. What else is on your radar? What else are you looking at and investigating right now? And what do you see happening out in the future with the way things are going?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I ask myself the same thing all the time. It's kind of interesting that we have this 12/21 of 12, where the Mayan calendar ends, and a lot of people are preparing for the end of the world and this, that, and the other. I think that psychologically, powers that be could use that to their advantage, somehow. I don't know. You never know what these people are thinking. They're so devious, and what their plans are. But everybody says that I talk to, all my contacts, they say, we think something is going to happen before the election. We really think, especially if Romney shows in the polls that he's ahead, not that, and you and I both know it doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes, like Stalin said. So I don't trust the media being involved in our voting for any office or anything, because they can announce anything they want. But if we did have an honest election, and Obama was feared that he was falling too far behind in the polls, wasn't going to be able to get reelected, there's no telling what he might try to pull, as far as the finances, as far as the banks, as far as the food supplies, as far as martial law. We don't know. But when his justice, or Department of Injustice, I'll call it, puts out all this information to law enforcement agencies saying if they got an NRA sticker, they're a terrorist. If they're a Republican, they're a terrorist. If they're right wing, they're a terrorist. If they're this, if they're a combat veteran, they're a terrorist. If they were in Iraq, they're a terrorist, and so on. So, and this, they're calling everybody a terrorist except themselves.
Because they're the terrorist.
Because they're the terrorist. And they are terrorists because they are violating constantly the law and committing treason on a daily basis in our Congress.
And shipping guns to Mexico to blame the Second Amendment, that's a false flag.
Oh, sure it is. And all of our politicians in Congress won't do a thing about it. They sit on their hands, and they're just a bunch of weak sisters. They could impeach this guy, but they won't. So, who knows?
Well, Romney won't even criticize the health care thing now. He's saying, oh, it's not a tax, it's a penalty. And the word is more and more, he is going to basically win, but they're going to try to steal it, and then he knows just to sit down and take it because he's bought and paid for by the same interest. But, you know, and again, I never believe in lesser of two evils, but, man, I got to tell you, things are moving at warp speed under Obama.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, every day is a new awakening of something, you know, breaks loose. And, you know, the feeling all the way across this country in general is that there's a storm on the horizon, and they can already see the lightning.
Exactly. Wow. So how do we avert a civil war? But at the same time, we can't just become slaves. I mean,
I don't think we're going to have a civil war. You might have pockets of rebellion, but there's no communications, there's no groups, there's no leaders, there's no movement, so to speak. You've got everybody wanting to take care of their families or their own little neighborhood or whatever. And that's just about as far as it goes. But what happens when they bring blue hats in to come out and start kicking people's doors in, then something might get organized.
And that's why they've got all the Army brigades, which they admit in the John Warner Defense Authorization Act, to go after the states. But that's not going to work. That's going to unify people if they try that.
Well, sure. It's never worked anywhere. It's never, but they don't care. You know, they'll try it because they're going to be someplace else sitting it out anyway. They're not going to be here. So, you know, we're just going to have to wait and see what unfolds. And it could be a financial collapse. It could be devaluation of the dollar. It could be China calling in their debt.
World War III. They're trying to get the Russians in a fight.
Well, yeah, and you know, attacks on Iran by Israel, and we got to pick sides. I mean, it could be a lot of things. And you know, with Obama siding with the PLO and the you know, all those Middle Eastern terrorist organizations.
Al-Qaeda. They're using Al-Qaeda.
Well, yeah. I mean, you got Hamas, you got PLO, you got all those different organizations that crop up overnight, and it's
stay there, Craig. I want to see what's happening with this next guest. I want to get your take on them openly using Al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria now, just briefly.
Everything we said came true. Everything we've done has been right.
I want to get Colonel Craig Roberts of RifleWarrior.com, best-selling author, researcher, retired police officer, helicopter pilot, all that, on with us to give us his take, also Army intelligence, his take on Obama and the globalists in NATO saying that the military's under their command now, Congress going along with it, and then publicly letting Al-Qaeda have Libya, and now using them against Syria, and now putting in the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. What is the larger plan there, and how do they juxtapose, give up all your rights because Al-Qaeda is hiding under your desk, and the TSA needs to grow up your wife and daughter because Al-Qaeda might be in their pants, but Al-Qaeda is good and taking over these countries?
Well, my take on it, you know, my flags went up when they did Egypt and ended up with the Muslim Brotherhood getting a big chunk of the say-so on what goes on in Egypt, because Egypt previously had been somewhat of an ally to us, and they weren't really a huge threat to Israel, and now they are, and they're not an ally of ours anymore. And then, of course, it went across North Africa, it hit Libya, and then you see the same groups with the same ties to the same people, basically back to Tehran, Iran, and they all have the same plan, and that basically is take over the entire planet and turn us Muslim, and try to kill off everybody that's not Muslim or fails to pay their tax and convert. So that's the issue I've got is, why did we support any of these people? You know, we shouldn't have had anything to do with that, and except to protect on our own interest. It didn't make sense. So when you got Hamas and you've got Al-Qaeda and you've got these different splinter groups that get involved in overthrowing these governments over there that so far haven't been a threat, now they've become a threat.
So the larger strategy is what, in your view?
Well, I think the larger strategy is to put all these people under the same set of circumstances, same rules, so to speak, the same leadership, the same objectives, and so that they organize to get better. You know, most of the different peoples of the Middle East don't like each other, and it's hard to get them to organize to do anything. The Iranians are Persian; they're not Arabs, and the Arabs are broken down into different factions, and the Egyptians aren't really Arabs. But when they use they're saying the enemy of my enemy is my friend, then even if they're enemies, they would unite against us or the West or against Christianity or against Judaism. They would do that. That should tell people something right there. And these are the very people that want to get this Sharia law going. They've taken over France. They've taken over Holland. They've taken over the UK. They've got their own neighborhoods and courts and everything. And now they're taking over New York City and places up in what is it, Milwaukee or not Milwaukee?
Michigan. But Colonel, my point is this. The more modern, moderate Muslim countries are being overthrown, and the globalists are putting the al-Qaeda jihadis in, and that's the plan. I'm saying it's an organized clash of civilizations playing us off against each other, but this really does illustrate the whole war on terror is a fraud and was designed to take our basic liberties. RifleWarrior.com. It's always great to have you, and say hi to the family for me.
We'll do it.
All right, there goes Colonel Craig Roberts. Known him about, I don't know, been interviewing him like 15, 16 years, but gotten to know him personally over the years. Really nice guy, has a lot of interesting sources, and just getting his take on everything. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.